The WNBA just drew a line in the sand, and the players' union didn't see it coming. January 20th isn't just another date on the calendar. It's the deadline the league quietly set for core player designations, and instead of waiting for negotiations to wrap up, the WNBA is moving forward like business never stopped. No pause, no panic, no concessions made in public. While the WNBA has been putting out statements about fairness and revenue sharing, the league has been doing something very different behind the scenes. Owners picked up the phone. Every general manager got the same message. Start planning free agency. Reach out to your targets. Get ready to move. That contrast matters, because this isn't just a disagreement over numbers. It's two sides operating with completely different assumptions about leverage. The union believed the league couldn't function without a new collective bargaining agreement in place. The owners just showed them that wasn't true. In their official statement, the league said their priority is a deal that significantly increases player salaries. That single sentence is the key to everything happening right now, because from the owner's perspective, they already delivered on that. Massive proposed raises, record-setting max contracts, life-changing money compared to the old deal. But the union isn't focused on salary. They're focused on revenue sharing. And that disconnect is exactly why we're here, stuck in a so-called status quo period where negotiations continue. But the business of basketball keeps rolling forward anyway. This isn't the league stalling, it's the league applying pressure. And once you understand how this status quo period actually works, it becomes clear why the balance of power may not be where the players thought it was. January 20th wasn't chosen by accident. That date represents the deadline for core player designations, one of the most powerful tools teams have in shaping their rosters. And by allowing that deadline to stand, without delaying it or tying it to a completed CBA, the WNBA sent a message that landed loud and clear across the league. We're moving forward. Behind the scenes, league officials contacted every general manager and delivered the same directive. Begin free agency planning. Start reaching out to players. Prepare qualifying offers. Handle business as if the season is coming, because it is. That alone flipped the negotiation dynamic. The WNBA entered this phase believing time was on their side. The assumption was simple: no new CBA, no real league activity. Delay creates pressure. Pressure forces compromise. That's how most fans expected this to play out. But the league didn't freeze. Under U.S. labor law, when a collective bargaining agreement expires without a replacement, both sides operate under what's called status quo. The rules of the old agreement stay in place while negotiations continue. The WNBA didn't invent this loophole. They're using the standard framework available to them. And they're using it aggressively. Instead of treating the status quo as a holding pattern, owners are treating it like a runway. Teams can't sign final contracts yet, but they can line up targets, feel out interest, and map out rosters. By the time a new CBA is ratified, free agency will be ready to explode immediately. That's strategic. The league even offered the union a full moratorium, an official pause on free agency activity, just hours before the deadline. The union declined. Once that happened, the owners stopped waiting. This puts the union in a difficult position. Publicly, they're arguing about long-term principles like revenue sharing and equity. Privately, the league is making sure the machinery keeps running. And that machinery matters. Expansion drafts are coming. Training camp timelines aren't moving. Teams need certainty. Players need clarity. The longer negotiations drag on, the more pressure shifts away from ownership and toward individual players who are trying to plan their careers. January 20th became a pressure point not because of what the league said, but because of what they did. By refusing to blink, the WNBA signaled that negotiations will continue, but on their timeline, not the union. And once that reality sets in, the leverage calculation changes fast. The most telling moment in this entire standoff wasn't a leaked phone call or a backroom report. It was a single sentence in the league's official statement. When the WNBA said its priority is a deal that significantly increases player salaries, that wasn't corporate fluff. That was ownership drawing a clear line around what they believe the negotiation is actually about. And here's the problem. The WNBA isn't negotiating on that same battlefield. Go read the union statements. Salary numbers barely show up. The language centers almost entirely on revenue sharing, equity, and long-term participation in league growth. Two sides, same table, completely different conversations. That's why talk stalled. From ownership's perspective, they already addressed compensation in a historic way. The proposed max salary reportedly jumps to around $1.3 million. Mid-tier veterans would see contracts north of $500,000. Rookie deals starting around $250,000. Compared to the expired CBA, these aren't incremental raises. They're structural changes that would more than double earnings for most players. So when the league says, "We've prioritized salaries," they genuinely believe they've delivered. But the union doesn't see salary as the core issue. For the WNBA, revenue sharing is about recognition and leverage. It's about tying player income directly to the league's growth instead of relying on fixed numbers set by ownership. In theory, that's a powerful argument, especially in a moment when ratings, attendance, and sponsorships are all trending up. The problem is timing. Growth doesn't automatically mean profitability, and profitability is the foundation revenue sharing is built on. The league is still subsidized. Expenses are rising alongside revenue. Expansion costs, charter travel, facilities, marketing, none of that disappears just because viewership is up. So when the union pushes revenue sharing now, ownership hears risk. Long-term, open-ended financial commitments in a league that hasn't yet proven it can stand on its own. That's the disconnect. One side is negotiating guaranteed money today. The other is negotiating a percentage of tomorrow. Neither position is unreasonable on its own, but they don't intersect cleanly. And when neither side shifts frameworks, progress stops. That's why the status quo emerged instead of a celebration. The league believes it already met its obligation. The union believes the real fight hasn't even started. And while both sides issue carefully worded statements, the business of basketball continues to move forward underneath them. Which brings us to the next question. What exactly did the owners put on the table, and why are they so confident the players will eventually take it? This is the part of the conversation that keeps getting glossed over in public, and it's exactly why ownership feels so confident right now. The WNBA didn't walk into these negotiations with symbolic raises or incremental bumps. They came in with a proposal that would fundamentally reshape how players are paid across the league. Start at the top. The proposed maximum salary reportedly jumps to around $1.3 million per year. Under the expired CBA, the max sat just under $250,000. That's not a tweak, that's a seismic shift. It would instantly make WNBA stars the highest paid women's team sport athletes in the world by a wide margin. Then there's the middle of the roster, where most players actually live. Veteran mid-tier contracts in the $500,000 to $550,000 range would more than double what many experienced players currently earn. These aren't fringe salaries. These are life-changing numbers for players who have spent years balancing off-season jobs, overseas play, and short career windows. Rookies, same story. First-year players reportedly starting around $250,000 means incoming talent would earn more in year one than many current All-Stars have ever made in a single season. That alone reshapes the league's talent pipeline and long-term stability. So when ownership says they've prioritized salary, they're not exaggerating. And here, why that matters strategically. Guaranteed salary increases are real money, immediate money players can plan around. Revenue sharing, on the other hand, is theoretical until the league consistently turns a profit. It's tied to projections, accounting definitions, and future growth that isn't guaranteed. From ownership's perspective, they're offering certainty in a league that's still financially fragile. This is also where the union's messaging runs into friction. By downplaying salary increases and focusing almost exclusively on revenue percentages, the WNBA risks disconnecting from large portions of its own membership. Not every player benefits equally from revenue sharing. Star players stand to gain the most. Role players, minimum contract players, and veterans near the end of their careers benefit far more from immediate salary spikes. And ownership knows that. That's why they're comfortable letting the clock run. The longer negotiations drag on, the more individual players start weighing guaranteed offers against abstract principles. Collective resolve is strong in theory, but fragile when real contracts hit the table. This isn't about whether players deserve more. Ownership has already acknowledged that with the numbers they proposed. This is about control, timing, and risk. And the owners are betting that when forced to choose between guaranteed money now and uncertain revenue later, most players will choose the former. Which leads directly into why the status quo period works so heavily in their favor. On the surface, the phrase status quo sounds neutral, like a pause, like both sides are stuck waiting. But in reality, this period overwhelmingly favors the WNBA. And that's exactly why ownership isn't sweating right now. Under U.S. labor law, when a collective bargaining agreement expires without a replacement, the league is required to maintain the terms of the old deal while negotiations continue. That means the basic structure stays intact. Qualifying offers still exist. Core designations still exist. Free agency mechanisms still exist. The league doesn't shut down just because there's no new CBA. The WNBA appeared to believe that without a new agreement, the league's hands would be tied. That free agency would freeze. That ownership would feel pressure to rush back to the table and give ground on revenue sharing. That didn't happen. Instead, the league leaned into the status quo and used it as a tool. Teams were told they could operate exactly as they always have, just under the old financial framework for now. And while final contract numbers may shift, once a new CBA is ratified, the groundwork can still be laid today. That's the key difference. A status quo period doesn't stop conversations. It doesn't stop planning. It doesn't stop leverage building. It just delays signatures. And ownership is using that delay to their advantage. The league even attempted to give the union what it wanted, at least temporarily. Just 1 hour before the midnight deadline, ownership proposed a formal moratorium on all free agency activity. A full pause, no movement, no pressure, no deadlines. The union declined. Once that offer was rejected, ownership stopped pretending they were waiting. Now teams are lining up targets. Front offices are gauging interest. Verbal commitments are being discussed. The expansion draft is being mapped out. When the CBA finally gets signed, free agency won't trickle, it'll explode. And here, where the imbalance becomes obvious. Owners can afford to wait. Their financial exposure doesn't increase during the status quo. They're operating under known rules with capped risk. Players, on the other hand, are stuck in limbo. Careers are short. Windows are small. Uncertainty hurts them far more than it hurts ownership. That's why the status quo isn't neutral. It shifts pressure downward, away from the league and onto individual players, who are now forced to decide how long they can afford to hold out for a principal that hasn't turned into dollars yet. And ownership knows exactly how that math usually ends. While the public conversation focused on statements and social media reactions, the real power move happened quietly, phone call by phone call. The WNBA didn't hold a press conference. They didn't leak dramatic quotes. They simply contacted every general manager in the league and delivered a clear directive: keep moving. Free agency prep continues. Player evaluations continue. Roster planning continues. No hedging, no waiting. That single decision changed the entire leverage dynamic. By instructing teams to start reaching out to free agents, the league ensured that conversations would begin whether the WNBA liked it or not. And even if contracts can't be finalized yet, interest can be gauged, intentions can be signaled, and unofficial frameworks can be built. That matters more than people realize. Once a player hears real interest from a team, especially with the salary numbers ownership has floated, it becomes much harder to stay unified around abstract demands. A $500,000 offer isn't theoretical, it's concrete. It forces personal decisions that collective messaging can't fully control. This pressure is amplified by the calendar. Expansion drafts are looming for Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire. Those teams need clarity fast. They need to identify core players, negotiate protections, and prepare for immediate competition. Expansion doesn't wait for labor disputes to resolve neatly. Neither does the rest of the league. Training camps open on fixed timelines. Media partners expect schedules. Sponsors expect visibility. The league's momentum, boosted heavily by stars like Caitlin Clark, depends on stability, not standoffs. Ownership understands that time pressure doesn't affect everyone equally. Front offices get to plan, owners get to wait. The league keeps its structure intact, but players, especially non-superstars, face ticking clocks, short careers, limited earning windows. The longer uncertainty drags on, the more attractive guaranteed money becomes. That's the leverage. By moving forward without confrontation, the league avoids public backlash while quietly forcing reality to set in. There's no lockout announcement, no threats, just business continuing as usual. And that's exactly why this move is so effective. The union expected pressure to flow upward. Instead, it's flowing inward, onto individual players making individual choices. And once that starts happening, collective resolve becomes much harder to maintain. This isn't owners flexing publicly. It's owners letting time do the work for them. The biggest mistake the players' union made wasn't asking for more money. It was misunderstanding when they actually had leverage, and when they didn't. From the outside, it looked like perfect timing. The WNBA just experienced its most visible season ever. Ratings spiked, arenas filled up, sponsors lined up. The buzz around stars like Caitlin Clark created the sense that the league had finally turned a corner. So the WNBA leaned into that momentum and pushed hard for revenue sharing. On paper, that sounds logical. In practice, it ignored a critical detail. Growth is not the same thing as profit. The league's revenue may be increasing, but the WNBA is still operating at a loss and remains subsidized by the NBA. That reality completely changes the negotiation landscape. Revenue sharing works when there's stable, predictable income to split. Right now, what exists is projected future value, not current surplus cash. Ownership knows this, and they built their entire proposal around that fact. Instead of opening the books, they offered certainty, guaranteed money, massive salary jumps, a $1.3 million max contract, mid-tier salaries more than doubling, rookie deals that would instantly change lives. Those are tangible gains players can count on regardless of ratings, attendance, or future media deals. The union, meanwhile, framed the conversation around fairness and long-term upside. That plays well publicly, but it doesn't pay rent in the short term. And here, where the miscalculation really shows. Not every player benefits equally from revenue sharing. Superstars with big marketing value would see the largest upside. But role players, veterans on the margins, and younger athletes trying to secure their first major contract care far more about guaranteed salary increases and a higher floor. For them, a sure $400,000 or $500,000 today outweighs a hypothetical slice of future revenue that may or may not materialize. That internal imbalance weakens collective leverage fast. Once the league signaled it was moving forward, free agency planning, core designations, expansion timelines, the union's position became harder to maintain. Players started facing real decisions instead of ideological ones. Do you wait and hope ownership caves? Or do you secure life-changing money now? Ownership bet that reality would fracture unity. And so far, that bet looks smart. The union assumed the league couldn't afford to proceed without them agreeing first. The owners proved the opposite. The machine keeps running. Rosters still get built. Seasons still move forward. That's the harsh lesson here. Leverage isn't about who's morally right. It's about who can afford to wait longer. And right now, the players' union is learning, too late, that time isn't on their side. This is the part of the conversation nobody likes to say out loud, but it's the foundation of everything happening right now. Yes, the WNBA is growing. Ratings are up. Attendance is up. Merchandise is moving. New fans are coming in because of stars like Caitlin Clark and dominant veterans like Ajah Wilson. All of that is real. But growth does not mean profit. And that distinction is where this entire negotiation breaks down. For nearly 3 decades, the league has operated with financial support from the NBA. That subsidy didn't disappear just because viewership jumped. Operating costs rose alongside the popularity. Charter flights, expanded marketing, better facilities, higher staffing expenses, expansion fees, media production upgrades. Growth costs money before it ever generates surplus. From ownership's perspective, this is still an investment phase. That's why the league is willing to dramatically increase salaries but refuses to open the door to revenue sharing. Revenue sharing implies stable, recurring profits. And right now, the league doesn't have profits to split, only projected future value. The union's argument is philosophical. Players are the product, so they deserve a percentage of everything the league earns. Ownership's argument is financial. You can't split money that doesn't exist yet. Both positions make sense in isolation, but negotiations don't happen in theory. They happen on balance sheets. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If revenue dips next year, if ratings normalize, if attendance plateaus, if the current surge proves temporary, ownership still has to cover operating losses. A revenue-sharing agreement would force them to pay players a percentage even during downturns. That's risk owners aren't willing to lock themselves into while the league is still stabilizing. Instead, they're offering guarantees. Guaranteed contracts, guaranteed raises, guaranteed salary floors that didn't exist before. That's how owners are choosing to share value, by absorbing the risk themselves and giving players certainty. From a business standpoint, that's rational. From a labor standpoint, it feels limiting. But this is where the union misread the moment. Growth creates optimism. Profit creates leverage. The WNBA has the first, not the second. And ownership knows that public perception doesn't change financial reality. Fans may see sold-out arenas and assume the league is printing money. The books tell a more complicated story, one where massive raises are already a bold move, not a conservative one. Until the league consistently turns profit without outside subsidy, revenue sharing remains a bridge too far. And that's the wall the union just ran into, head first. This isn't about disrespecting player value. It's about timing. And right now, the timing favors caution, not concession. When you strip away the statements, the social media posts, and the emotional framing, this standoff comes down to one uncomfortable question: who can afford to wait? Right now, the answer is clear. The WNBA can wait. The league can operate under the status quo. Games will still be scheduled. Expansion will still move forward. Front offices will still plan. Sponsors will still activate. Media partners will still broadcast. Ownership doesn't lose leverage by letting time pass. They gain it. The WNBA, on the other hand, is fighting the clock. Every day without a new CBA creates uncertainty for players whose careers are short and whose earning windows are narrow. A rookie hopping to secure her first real contract doesn't benefit from waiting on a theoretical revenue split. A veteran nearing the end of her prime doesn't benefit from holding out while guaranteed money sits on the table. Those individual realities quietly weaken collective resolve. That's why this moment feels so lopsided. The union believed the league's growth gave them leverage, and in the long term it probably will. But leverage isn't about headlines or momentum. It's about alternatives. Ownership has them. Players don't. What makes this situation even more telling is how calmly the league is proceeding. There's no panic, no threats, no dramatic counterstatements, just deadlines, procedures, and forward motion. That's not the behavior of a side that feels cornered. It's the behavior of a side that knows the system favors patience. And here's the part that stings the most for the union. Ownership already offered a win they could have claimed publicly. Massive salary increases, historic raises, life-changing guarantees in a league that has never consistently turned a profit. That deal would have been celebrated as progress. Instead, it was rejected in pursuit of something the league isn't financially ready to give. That doesn't make the union wrong in principle. Revenue sharing is a reasonable,